My husband, the boss, smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're terminated. Take your old laptop and get out. This $8 million company is mine now, and Melissa will take your place. The divorce papers arrive tomorrow." Security escorted me out. I smiled, knowing my hidden code would activate in 10 minutes. The result would be their utter ruin. Jacob's hand slid the termination letter across his desk while Melissa stood beside him, her fingers resting possessively on his shoulder. "Effective immediately," he said, his wedding ring catching the morning light. "Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. I stared at the man I'd spent 8 years building a company with, the man who'd promised to love me forever, and felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. The timer I'd set 6 months ago had just gone off. 10 minutes. That's all they had left before their world came crashing down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. 3 years ago, Jacob and I sat cross-legged on the floor of our cramped Seattle apartment, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and half-drunk cups of coffee. The rain tapped against our window as we sketched out what would become next core solutions on the backs of grocery receipts and old envelopes. My fingers flew across my laptop keyboard, writing code while Jacob paced behind me, throwing out ideas faster than I could implement them. "What if we could predict security breaches before they happen?" he'd said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Not just react to them but actually see them coming?" I remember looking up at him, my glasses sliding down my nose. "I can build that," I told him. "Give me 3 months and I'll create something nobody's ever seen before." He'd kissed me then, right there among the chaos of our makeshift office. "This is why I love you, Brenda. You make the impossible possible." Those early days were magic. We'd work 18-hour days, surviving on convenience store sandwiches and pure determination. Jacob handled the business side, finding investors, sweet-talking potential clients, managing the books. I lived in the code, building our platform line by line, function by function. We were perfectly balanced, or so I thought. Our wedding happened right in the middle of launching our first major product. I wore a simple white dress I'd bought online for $200, and we got married at the courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon because we couldn't afford to take a whole weekend off. Jacob held my hands at the altar and made promises that went beyond the traditional vows. "We're partners in everything," he'd whispered just for me to hear. 50-50 in business and in life. Your dreams are my dreams." I believed every word. The company grew faster than either of us expected. Within 18 months, we'd moved from our apartment to a real office space. Nothing fancy, just a converted warehouse with exposed pipes and concrete floors. We hired our first employees, signed our first $1 million contract, and suddenly Next Core Solutions was more than just a dream. It was real and it was ours. At least I thought it was ours. The changes started small. So small I didn't notice them at first. During our Monday morning meetings, Jacob began interrupting me when I explained technical updates to our team. "What Brenda means is," he'd say, then proceed to explain my own work back to me in simpler terms. When I confronted him about it later, he'd laugh it off. "I'm just trying to help, honey. You know how you get lost in the technical details sometimes." Then came the client presentations. I'd spend days preparing demonstrations of our newest features, only to have Jacob present them himself while I sat silently beside him like a decorative piece. "Brenda's our technical genius," he'd tell clients with a patronizing smile. "She makes the magic happen behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. That's where he wanted me. The day Melissa Rodriguez walked into our office for her interview, I actually felt relieved. Finally, another woman in our boys' club of programmers and sales guys. She was sharp, professional, with an MBA from the University of Washington and 5 years of experience at Microsoft. Her references were impeccable. "She's perfect," I told Jacob after the interview. "She understands operations in a way we desperately need." He hired her the next day. Melissa fit into our company culture immediately. She reorganized our chaotic filing system, streamlined our client onboarding process, and somehow made our disaster of a supply closet actually functional. She brought homemade cookies to meetings and remembered everyone's birthdays. I thought I'd found a friend. The late nights started about 2 months after she joined. First, it was preparing for a major client pitch. Then it was restructuring the sales department. Then it was strategic planning for the next quarter. Always something urgent, always something that couldn't wait until morning. "You head home," Jacob would tell me around 7 o'clock. Melissa and I need to finish this revenue projection. Don't wait up. I'd drive home alone to our empty house. We'd finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom in the suburbs. I'd heat up leftover Chinese food and fall asleep on the couch waiting for him, waking up when he crawled into bed at 2 or 3 in the morning, smelling like her perfume. You're imagining things, he said when I finally worked up the courage to ask about it. Melissa wears the same perfume half the women in Seattle wear. You're being paranoid. Was I? I started doubting myself, questioning my instincts. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the stress of growing the company was making me see problems where there weren't any. After all, Jacob loved me. We'd built this company together. We were partners. The board meeting in September should have been my moment of triumph. I'd just completed a major platform upgrade that increased our processing speed by 300%. Our clients were ecstatic. But when Jacob presented to our investors, my breakthrough became a team effort led by our technical department. Don't you mean led by Brenda? Richard Thompson, our lead investor, had asked. Jacob laughed. Of course, Brenda's our CTO. But she'll be the first to tell you this was a collaborative effort. I sat there, frozen, unable to contradict him in front of the board. Melissa took notes beside him, her expression neutral, professional. Just doing her job. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Jacob, listening to his breathing, and realized something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't our company anymore. Somewhere along the way it had become his company and I was just another employee who happened to share his bed. The next morning I started paying closer attention. I noticed how Melissa always positioned herself next to Jacob in meetings. How she'd touch his arm when she laughed at his jokes. How he'd started using we when talking about decisions. But the we meant him and Melissa, not him and me. I told myself I was being ridiculous, jealous, insecure. All the things Jacob accused me of being when I tried to talk to him about it. But deep down in that place where we store truths we're not ready to face, I knew. My perfect life was already gone. I just hadn't admitted it yet. That October afternoon started like any other. I'd picked up Thai food from Jacob's favorite place downtown, the one with the red awning and the owner who always remembered our orders. Pad Thai, extra spicy, just how he liked it. I balanced the takeout bags in one hand and used my keycard with the other, heading straight for his corner office. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember because I'd just checked my phone, making sure I wasn't interrupting his 3 o'clock conference call. His office door was cracked open. I could hear voices from the conference room down the hall, including Jacob's distinctive laugh. Good, his meeting had moved. I pushed the door open with my hip, ready to leave the food on his desk as a surprise. Melissa's silver laptop sat open on his desk, still logged in, the screen bright and demanding attention. I should have just closed it. Should have left the food and walked away. But there was something about seeing her personal computer in his private space that made me pause. The screen displayed her email and the preview of the top message made my stomach tighten. Can't wait for this weekend. The cabin is perfect for what we discussed. From Jacob's email address. I set the food down slowly, my eyes fixed on that screen. My finger hovered over the trackpad for just a second before I scrolled down. The next email's preview read, "Once Brenda's out, we can restructure everything." The Thai food smell suddenly made me nauseous. I sank into Jacob's chair and started reading. Really reading. Email after email, a correspondence stretching back 4 months. My husband and Melissa weren't just having an affair. They were planning a complete takeover of the company. My company. The platform I'd coded with my own hands. The board trusts me completely, Jacob had written 3 weeks ago. When I tell them Brenda's been unstable and her work is suffering, they'll support the termination. 48% ownership means nothing if she's voted out for cause. Melissa's response was even worse. The documentation I've been creating will support that narrative. Every time she questions your decisions, I note it as aggressive behavior. Every time she works from home, it's absence without proper communication. We have enough. I grabbed my phone and started taking photos. Quick, sharp clicks of the camera capturing every damning word. My hands stayed steady even as my chest felt like it might explode. 23 photos. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I closed the laptop carefully, exactly as I'd found it, and was unwrapping the Thai food when Jacob walked in with 2 other executives. "Honey." His face lit up with what I now recognized as practiced affection. What a nice surprise. Thought you might be hungry, I managed, my voice somehow normal. Hi Tom. Hi David. They exchanged pleasantries while I played the loving wife, mentioning I had to get back to debugging the new security protocol. Jacob kissed my cheek, a performance for his colleagues, and I left, walking steadily until I reached the parking garage where I threw up beside my car. That night, I lay next to Jacob while he scrolled through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something. Was he texting her? Planning their weekend at some cabin? I studied his profile in the blue light of his screen, this stranger wearing my husband's face. Everything okay? He asked without looking at me. You were quiet at dinner. Just tired. The new protocol is complex. Maybe you should take a break. You've been pushing yourself pretty hard. There was the groundwork for my instability. I made a non-committal sound and turned away, my mind racing. They were planning to force me out, but when? How much time did I have? The next morning, after Jacob left for his gym session, I opened my laptop and began my real work. Not the security protocol, something far more important. I started documenting everything. Every contribution I'd made to the company, every piece of code I'd written, every innovation that had come from my work. I created encrypted folders, backed up to 3 different cloud services under accounts Jacob didn't know existed. Then I started recording. I bought a tiny voice recorder from a spy shop downtown, paying cash while wearing sunglasses like some character in a bad movie. But it worked. I recorded meetings where Jacob presented my ideas as his own. I recorded him telling potential investors that I was just the technical support, while he was the visionary. The hardest part was continuing to sleep next to him. Continuing to kiss him goodbye in the mornings. Continuing to pretend I didn't know he was destroying everything we'd built together while planning a future with another woman. Some nights, I'd lie awake until 3 or 4 in the morning, writing code on my laptop while he snored beside me. But this wasn't vengeful code. Not yet. This was protection. I embedded tracking protocols into every major system I'd built, invisible markers that would prove the code was mine. I created backup doors into the platform, not to harm it but to ensure I could prove my authorship if needed. Each line was carefully crafted to be completely undetectable during normal operations. You're working too much, Jacob said one morning, finding me asleep at my desk at home. Maybe we should talk about reducing your responsibilities. Another brick in their wall. I started seeing Dr. Patricia Reeves, a therapist in Tacoma, far enough away that I wouldn't run into anyone from work. I paid cash, gave a fake last name and poured out my story to a stranger who handed me tissues and told me I wasn't crazy. Gaslighting, she said during our 3rd session. What you're describing is textbook emotional manipulation. But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid? She looked at me over her glasses. You have photographic evidence of their affair and conspiracy. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. November turned into December. The company holiday party was torture. Watching Jacob and Melissa carefully maintain professional distance while their eyes found each other across the room. I wore my best dress and smiled until my face hurt, playing the devoted wife and dedicated C. Brenda's the heart of our technical team, Jacob told everyone during his toast. Past tense, I noticed. Not is creating or is building. Just the heart, something that could be replaced. 2 weeks before Christmas, I heard them on a conference call they didn't know I was part of. I dialed in early to a board meeting and they were using the line, thinking they were alone. After the new year, Jacob was saying. We'll do it in January. Clean start. The divorce papers? Melissa asked. Same day. Rip the Band-Aid off. By February you'll officially be COO, and we can stop sneaking around. I muted my line and listened to them plan my professional and personal execution, taking notes in my encrypted journal. January. I had less than a month to prepare. That night I worked until dawn, not on company code but on my insurance policy. Every system I'd built for NextCore had a heartbeat, a rhythm I knew better than anyone. I didn't create destruction. I created vulnerability. Small gaps that would only matter if someone knew exactly where to look. The kind of gaps that hackers dream about finding. I wasn't going to use them. Not directly. But if Jacob wanted to take everything from me, he should know that everything included the knowledge of how to protect what I'd built. Without me, those vulnerabilities would be like leaving windows open in a hurricane. Come to bed, Jacob called from the bedroom at 4 a.m. 5 more minutes, I replied, typing the last line of code that would serve as my insurance policy. He was snoring when I finally crawled into bed, my laptop warm from hours of work. I looked at his sleeping face and felt nothing but resolve. They thought they were so smart, documenting my instability and planning their takeover. They had no idea what I was capable of when cornered. I closed my eyes and started counting down the days until January. Until the charade would end. Until they would learn exactly who they'd underestimated. The January countdown had begun, but my mind kept circling back to earlier moments. Red flags I'd dismissed, explained away, or simply refused to see. Now, with the truth burning in my chest, every memory took on a different shade. The first board meeting I wasn't invited to happened in early August. I'd been preparing my quarterly technical presentation for weeks, creating visualizations that would help our investors understand the breakthrough we'd achieved in predictive analytics. That morning, Jacob stopped by my office with coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Change of plans for today's board meeting," he said, setting the cup on my desk. "Richard Thompson wants to focus purely on financials and market expansion. Pretty dry stuff. No need for you to sit through 3 hours of number crunching." "But I always present the technical updates," I said, confused. Richard specifically asked about our algorithm improvements last quarter. Jacob's jaw tightened for just a second. "I'll handle it. You know how these investors get. Sometimes too much technical detail makes them nervous about things they don't understand. Better to keep it high level." I spent that afternoon in my office watching the clock, feeling strangely untethered. When Jacob returned, he was vague about the discussions. "Went great," was all he said. "They're very pleased with our direction." 2 weeks later, I ran into Richard Thompson at a coffee shop downtown. His discomfort was immediate and obvious. "Brenda, how are you feeling?" he asked with the kind of careful tone people use around someone fragile. "I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be?" He shifted his weight, glancing around like he was looking for an escape route. "Jacob mentioned you've been under a lot of pressure. Taking some time to recalibrate." Recalibrate. The word tasted bitter. "Richard, I've never been more focused. Did Jacob show you the predictive analytics breakthrough? He mentioned you've been working on something." His voice was cautious, diplomatic. "But he's concerned about your intensity around it. Sometimes brilliance and burnout can look very similar." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and excused myself, leaving my untouched latte on the counter. The financial discrepancies started small. A consulting fee here, a software license there. Amounts that weren't huge but didn't match any vendors I recognized. I found them late one night while reviewing quarterly reports, preparing for what I thought would be my next board presentation. Global Tech Consulting, $47,000. I'd never heard of them. A quick search showed a website that looked professional but generic, with no real information about their services. Integrated Systems Solutions, $31,500. Another ghost company with a phantom digital footprint. I printed everything out and confronted Jacob the next morning. "Why are you going through financial reports?" He didn't even look up from his computer. "That's not your area. I'm a 48% owner of this company. Every area is my area." He sighed, the sound of a patient parent dealing with a difficult child. "These are standard business expenses. Consultants I've brought in to help with expansion strategy. Do you want to micromanage everything, or do you want to focus on what you do best? I want transparency about where our money is going." "Our money." He finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "Interesting. When it's the code, it's your platform. When it's the finances, suddenly it's our money." The conversation spiraled into an argument that ended with him storming out. That evening, Melissa stayed late to mediate, sitting in our conference room with her perfect posture and concerned expression. "He's just stressed," she told me. "You both are. Maybe if you focused on your technical responsibilities and let him handle the business side, things would be smoother." Looking back, I can see how carefully orchestrated it all was. The restructuring proposal came in September, presented as a necessary evolution for our growing company. Jacob had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, complete with organizational charts that showed him at the top as CEO, with me underneath as CTO reporting directly to him. "It's just formalizing what we already have," he explained to our senior staff. "I handle business, Brenda handles technology. This makes it clearer for investors and clients. But we're co-founders, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Equal partners. Of course we are. This doesn't change that. It's just about operational efficiency. Tom from sales nodded along. David from marketing seemed to think it made sense. Even my own development team stayed quiet. I realized then that the groundwork had been laid long before this meeting. Everyone had already been convinced this was reasonable, necessary, maybe even overdue. Melissa had been taking notes, naturally. I think what Jacob's proposing makes a lot of sense, she offered as if her opinion had been solicited. Clear hierarchies reduce confusion and improve decision-making speed. Since when do we need hierarchy between founders? I asked. Jacob's smile was patronizing. Since we stopped being a two-person startup and became an $8 million company. The vote was scheduled for the next board meeting. I spent the intervening weeks trying to shore up support, but every conversation felt like pushing against a wall that had already been built. Meanwhile, Melissa's tentacles were extending everywhere. She started joining client calls that had always been mine, introduced as our operations strategist who's helping optimize client relationships. She attended the technical demos I conducted, taking notes and asking questions that subtly undermined my explanations. When Brenda says revolutionary, what she means is incrementally improved, she'd clarify to clients, her tone helpful and professional. We want to manage expectations appropriately. She began copying herself on emails between me and my development team, just to stay in the loop. She scheduled one-on-ones with my direct reports to understand their challenges better. She even started bringing coffee to our morning stand-ups, positioning herself as the caring, attentive leader while I was painted as the obsessive technocrat. The isolation was the cruelest part. Sarah, our lead developer who'd been with us since year one, stopped joining me for our usual Tuesday lunches. Just really swamped, she'd say, avoiding eye contact. Marcus, our database architect, used to bounce ideas off me constantly. Now he sent formal emails with Melissa copied, requesting approval for decisions he'd previously made independently. Even the administrative staff grew distant. Conversations would halt when I walked into the break room. The easy camaraderie we'd built over 3 years evaporated like morning mist. One afternoon in November, I overheard a conversation between two junior developers who didn't know I was in the supply closet looking for printer paper. Is it true she had a breakdown in the parking garage? One asked. That's what I heard. Jacob's been really patient with her, but it must be affecting the company. Melissa said we need to be supportive but maintain professional boundaries. Yeah, she's been great about helping us navigate the situation. The situation. That's what I'd become. Not the co-founder who'd built the platform they worked on every day, but a problem to be managed. I sat in that supply closet for 20 minutes, surrounded by boxes of paper and toner cartridges, understanding finally how completely I'd been outmaneuvered. Every single person in the company had been given a narrative about me, and I'd been too buried in my work, too trusting of my husband to see it happening. That night I watched Jacob at dinner, cutting his steak with precise movements, checking his phone between bites. He'd gained weight recently, too many client dinners, he said. But now I wondered if they were really client dinners or something else entirely. The team seems distant lately, I ventured. Maybe you're projecting, he replied without looking up. Have you been taking those walks Dr. Reeves recommended? My blood froze. I'd never told him about Dr. Reeves. What? He glanced up, his expression neutral. You mentioned a therapist-recommended exercise. For stress. Had I? I couldn't remember. Maybe I had. The gaslighting was so effective that I questioned even my own memories. Right? I said, returning to my meal. The final board meeting I attended was in December. I wasn't presenting, Jacob had made that clear, but as a major shareholder I couldn't be excluded entirely. I sat at the far end of the conference table, watching him present my work as collaborative team efforts, while Melissa provided supporting documentation for every claim. Richard Thompson and the other investors barely looked at me. When I tried to add context to a technical question, Jacob smoothly interrupted. Brenda's absolutely right, and that's exactly what our documentation shows. He made my expertise sound like an echo of his own understanding. I left that meeting knowing my professional assassination was complete. In 2 months, I'd gone from co-founder and technical visionary to unstable liability. And the worst part? Everyone believed it because the story had been told so carefully, so gradually, that it seemed like natural truth rather than constructed fiction. That night, as Jacob slept beside me, I opened my laptop one more time. The code I'd been writing wasn't just insurance anymore. It was justice waiting to be served. The code flowed across my screen like digital poetry, each line more elegant than the last. 3 days before everything ended, at 2:14 a.m. on a Monday, I watched our platform do something nobody thought possible. It detected an attack pattern that didn't exist yet. A future breach predicted and prevented before the hackers even launched their assault. Pacific Financial Group, our second biggest client, never knew how close they came to disaster. Our algorithm identified 17 separate vulnerability points being probed by what looked like innocent traffic. But the pattern, the beautiful, terrifying pattern, showed a coordinated attack scheduled to hit in exactly 6 hours. I called their head of security directly from my home office, waking him up. "Tom, you need to get your team online now. You're about to be hit with a coordinated breach attempt targeting your wire transfer protocols." "Brenda? It's 2 in the morning. What are you talking about?" "Check your servers. Specifically the Singapore and London nodes. You'll see probe traffic that looks routine, but it's not. They're testing response times for a synchronized attack at 8:24 a.m. Eastern." The silence on the other end stretched out. Then I heard rapid typing. "Jesus Christ. How did you? We're seeing it now. This is huge." I walked him through the countermeasures, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I helped his team shore up their defenses in real time. By 5 a.m. we'd turned their system into a fortress. When the attack came at 8:24, exactly as predicted, it bounced off like rain against steel. The call came at 9 a.m. Paul Harrison, Pacific Financial CEO, was nearly shouting with excitement. "Brenda, do you understand what you just did? You saved us from what could have been a $100 million loss. Maybe more. This is revolutionary." "The platform did what it was designed to do," I said, exhausted but exhilarated. "This is why NextCore exists. We need to set up a call with Jacob and the team. This deserves recognition. Hell, this deserves a press release." My stomach sank. Of course. Jacob will coordinate everything. The client call was scheduled for that afternoon. I prepared a detailed presentation showing exactly how our algorithm had detected the future attack pattern, the predictive modeling that made it possible, and the implications for cybersecurity globally. This was Nobel Prize-level innovation, and it had come from my mind, my code, my sleepless nights. Jacob reviewed my presentation an hour before the call. "This is a bit technical," he said, frowning at my slides. "Let me simplify it for the client." I watched him delete slide after slide of my work, replacing them with vague buzzwords and corporate speak. My groundbreaking algorithm became our proprietary threat matrix. The predictive modeling became advanced analytics. 3 years of innovation reduced to marketing fluff. When the call began, Jacob positioned himself in front of the camera while I sat slightly off to the side, barely in frame. "Paul, we're thrilled that NextCore's platform protected Pacific Financial," Jacob began, his voice smooth and confident. "This is exactly the kind of result we've been working toward as a team." "Incredible work," Paul responded. "Brenda, that call at 2 a.m., you sounded like you were watching the future." Jacob jumped in before I could respond. "That's the beauty of our system. It allows our entire team to monitor and respond to threats proactively. Brenda was simply the one on call last night. Oh, I hadn't slept in 36 hours perfecting the algorithm. There was no on-call schedule. This was my life's work. Actually, I started, but Jacob smoothly interrupted. What Brenda's too modest to say is that this is a collaborative effort. While she handles the technical implementation, our entire team contributes to the platform's success. Melissa, our head of operations, has been instrumental in creating the protocols that made this rapid response possible. Melissa appeared on screen from her home office, nodding graciously. "Thank you, Jacob. It's really about having the right systems in place to support our technical team's brilliant work." Support? She didn't even understand how the algorithm functioned. The call continued for another 20 minutes, with Jacob masterfully redirecting every bit of credit away from me while appearing to praise my contribution. By the end, Paul Harrison probably thought I was just a coding technician following orders from visionary leadership. After the call ended, I sat in our empty conference room staring at the blank screen. My greatest professional achievement had just been stolen in real time, and I'd been powerless to stop it. That evening, I made my final preparations. Every piece of documentation that proved my authorship of NextScore's core technology went into an encrypted cloud storage account registered under my maiden name. Patent applications I'd filed independently before the company's formation. Original code repositories with timestamp verification. Email chains from the early days when Jacob freely admitted he couldn't understand my technical explanations. I also made copies of something else, the real financial records. Not the sanitized versions Jacob showed the board, but the raw data showing where money actually went. Global Tech Consulting, I'd discovered, was registered to an address that happened to be Melissa's cousin's apartment. Integrated Systems Solutions traced back to a shell company in Delaware with no actual employees. They weren't just planning to steal my company. They'd already been embezzling from it. Wednesday morning, I met with Sandra Whitfield, a divorce attorney recommended by my therapist. Her office was in Bellevue, far enough from Seattle's tech corridor that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. Sandra was in her 60s, with sharp eyes that had seen every type of marital betrayal imaginable. Washington is a community property state, she explained after reviewing my documentation. Normally, that would mean a 50-50 split of assets acquired during marriage. But your husband has been very clever. The company structure shows you as a technical contractor who was granted equity, not a co-founder. Your name isn't on any of the incorporation documents. That's impossible. We founded it together. She showed me the paperwork. My signature was there, but the documents had been altered, digitally modified to change my status from co-founder to early employee. The timestamp showed they'd been updated just 2 months ago. He's been planning this for a while, Sandra said gently. The good news is if we can prove fraud, everything changes. But that's a long, expensive fight. How expensive? More than you'll have access to once he freezes the joint accounts, which he will do the moment you're served. I wrote her a check from my personal account, one Jacob didn't know about, where I'd been slowly accumulating money from small consulting jobs. Start building the case, I told her. I'll handle the rest. That last night, Jacob suggested dinner at home instead of going out. I want to cook for you, he said, and for a moment he looked like the man I'd fallen in love with. The one who'd stayed up all night with me debugging code, who'd celebrated every small victory with genuine joy. He made pasta carbonara, my favorite, and opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. We sat at our dining room table, the one we'd bought at a garage sale our first year together, and refinished ourselves. Remember when we could barely afford ramen? He said, raising his glass. Look how far we've come. We've built something amazing, I agreed, clinking my glass against his. He reached across the table and took my hand. I know things have been tense lately. The company's growth, the stress. It's been hard on both of us. But I want you to know, Brenda, you're the most brilliant person I've ever met. Past tense? No, I was imagining it. After this next quarter, let's take a vacation, he continued. Somewhere tropical. Just us. That sounds perfect, I lied, watching him lie to me. We did the dishes together like we used to. He washed, I dried. Our movements were synchronized from years of practice. When we were done, he pulled me close and kissed me, and for just a moment I let myself feel the loss of what we'd had. I love you, he whispered. I know, I said, because I couldn't say it back. Not anymore. That night, as Jacob slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake running through my mental checklist. The code was in place. The documentation was secured. The lawyer was retained. Everything was ready. At 3 a.m. I slipped out of bed and walked through our house one last time. The pictures on the walls. Our wedding, our first office, the day we signed our first major client. All those moments when I'd believed we were building something together. I made myself coffee and sat in my home office, watching the sunrise through the window. In 6 hours, Jacob would call me into his office. In 6 hours, my life as I knew it would end. But he didn't know about the timer on my phone. He didn't know about the code waiting to activate. He didn't know that sometimes, the person you underestimate the most is the one who knows your systems better than you know them yourself. I opened my laptop and typed a single command into a terminal window. scheduling it for exactly 10 minutes after 9 a.m. Then I closed the laptop, finished my coffee, and went to get ready for my last day as Jacob's wife and employee. I chose the charcoal gray suit, the one I'd worn to our first investor pitch. My hands were steady as I buttoned the jacket, applied lipstick without a tremor, and slipped on the watch Jacob had given me for our 5th anniversary. Every piece of armor mattered now. The call came at exactly 9 a.m. Not 8:59, not 9:01. Jacob had always been precise about his cruelties. Brenda. His assistant Carol sounded uncomfortable. Jacob needs to see you in his office right away. He says it's important. I'll be right there. I picked up my laptop bag, the old one from our startup days with the coffee stain on the corner, and walked through the office with my head high. Developers looked up from their screens as I passed. Did they know? Had word already spread through the carefully constructed gossip network? The elevator ride to the executive floor felt both endless and too quick. Each floor that passed was another second closer to the performance Jacob had orchestrated. When the doors opened, I saw Carol avoiding eye contact, suddenly very interested in her computer screen. Go right in, she mumbled. They're waiting. They. Plural. I turned the handle of the door we'd installed together, the one with the slight squeak Jacob had always meant to fix. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a scene staged with theatrical precision. Jacob sat behind his mahogany desk. Our desk, the one we'd bought at an estate sale, joking that one day we'd be successful enough to deserve it. Melissa stood to his right, her hand resting on the back of his chair with casual ownership. She wore a red dress. Power color. Message received. But there was a third person. Gary Hughes from HR. Lurking in the corner with a manila folder and the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Brenda. Please sit down. Jacob's voice carried that CEO tone he'd been practicing, authoritative but detached. I remained standing. I'm comfortable, thanks. Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance that I wasn't following his script. Very well. He straightened a stack of papers on his desk. A nervous tell I recognized from years of watching him prepare for difficult conversations. I'm afraid we need to discuss your position here at NextCore. My position as co-founder and CTO? Melissa shifted slightly. Gary clutched his folder tighter. Your position as an employee, Jacob corrected, his tone sharp. And I'm afraid that position is being terminated, effective immediately. The words hung in the air between us. I counted 3 heartbeats before responding. On what grounds? Performance issues, failure to collaborate with leadership, and creating a hostile work environment. He picked up a document, pretending to read from it. There have been multiple complaints about your erratic behavior and inability to work within the new organizational structure. Complaints from whom? That's confidential, Melissa interjected, her first words since I'd entered. But I can assure you they've been thoroughly documented. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd welcomed, mentored, invited to our home for dinners. She met my gaze without flinching. How long? I asked her directly. I'm sorry. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? Gary made a strangled sound. Jacob's face flushed. That's exactly the kind of baseless accusation that exemplifies your recent behavior, Jacob said coldly. You're paranoid, Brenda. You see conspiracies where there are none. So Melissa's hand on your shoulder is professional? The trips to the cabin? The late-night strategy sessions? You're embarrassing yourself, he said, but I caught the quick glance he shot at Gary. No, you're embarrassing yourself. But please, continue with your little show. His jaw clenched. This wasn't going according to plan. I was supposed to be emotional, hysterical, giving them more ammunition for their narrative. Instead, I stood perfectly still, my phone recording everything from my jacket pocket. The decision has been made, he said, sliding a packet across the desk. Your termination is effective immediately. You'll receive 2-week severance, continuation of health insurance for 30 days, and... He paused, that cruel smile finally breaking through. You can keep your old laptop. The one from the early days. Call it sentimental value. The laptop. My 2019 MacBook Pro that contained every original line of code, every algorithm, every innovation that built this company. He thought he was being magnanimous, throwing scraps to the woman he'd destroyed. He had no idea he was handing me a loaded weapon. That's generous, I said flatly. We think so, Melissa chimed in. Considering the circumstances. The circumstances being that you're stealing my company? Nobody's stealing anything, Jacob said, his voice taking on an edge of warning. You're a minority shareholder who's being removed from operational duties due to documented performance issues. Your equity remains intact, though of course its value will depend on the company's continued success under new leadership. New leadership being Melissa? The board will make that determination. The board he'd been poisoning against me for months. The board that would rubber stamp whatever he recommended. Is that everything? I asked. Jacob seemed surprised by my calm. He'd prepared for tears, anger, pleading. Not this cold acceptance. Not quite. His smile widened and I saw the man behind the mask, the one who'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. There's one more matter. Personal in nature. He pulled out another envelope, this one with a law firm's logo in the corner. I've filed for divorce. The papers will be delivered to the house tomorrow morning. I thought it would be cleaner to handle both matters at once. Professional and personal separation. The room tilted slightly, but I held steady. Even expecting it, hearing the words felt like being hollowed out with a dull spoon. How efficient of you. I'm moving out tonight, he continued as if discussing a dinner reservation. You can keep the house for now. We'll sort out the division of assets through our attorneys. Our attorneys. Already separate. Already divided. Anything else? My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. Gary finally spoke, his voice apologetic. Standard procedure. Of course. I picked up the termination packet without looking at it, then reached for the laptop bag Jacob had gestured to, my old computer sitting on the side table, obviously placed there for this moment. Brenda, Jacob said as I turned to leave. I stopped but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, you're brilliant. You always have been. But brilliance without business acumen, without the ability to play the game, it only gets you so far. I did turn then, meeting his eyes one last time. You're right, Jacob. I never learned to play the game. I was too busy building the company you're about to destroy. His smirk faltered slightly. Melissa's hand moved to his shoulder again, a gesture of support or possession. Security is waiting outside, Gary said quietly. 2 guards stood in the hallway, trying to look professional rather than uncomfortable. I recognized them, Tony and Marcus, guys I'd chatted with every morning for 3 years. Morning, guys, I said pleasantly. Shall we? The walk through the office was surreal. Every face that turned toward me was a verdict. Some looked away quickly, complicit in their knowledge. Others seemed confused, watching their CTO being marched out like a criminal. A few, my original team members, looked stricken. Sarah half stood from her desk as I passed. I shook my head slightly and she sank back down. At my office, former office, I was given 10 minutes to pack. I made a show of slowly placing personal items in a box. The coffee mug from our first successful product launch, a photo of the original team, the stress ball shaped like a bug that developers had given me as a joke. I left everything important. The awards, the certificates, the framed first dollar we'd earned. Let them gather dust as monuments to what Jacob had destroyed. That's everything, I told Tony, who looked like he wanted to apologize but couldn't. The elevator ride down felt like descending from a life I'd never get back. Through the lobby, past the reception desk where Emma watched with wide eyes, out through the glass doors I'd helped select because they represented transparency and openness. The January air hit my face, sharp and clean. Behind me, the building rose into the gray Seattle sky, containing everything I'd built and lost in the span of 3 years. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email, Melissa. I deleted it without reading whatever gloating message she'd sent. Another buzz. This time my calendar notification. System maintenance 10 minutes. I looked back at the building one more time, then walked to my car, placing the laptop bag carefully in the passenger seat. 10 minutes until the code activated. 10 minutes until they learned what happens when you steal from someone who built the very foundation you're standing on. My car sat in the parking garage like a refuge, but I couldn't bring myself to get in yet. The laptop bag weighed heavy in my hand as I stood beside the driver's door, watching the digital clock on my phone tick forward. 9:08, 2 minutes. I placed the bag carefully in the passenger seat and pulled out my phone, opening an encrypted messaging app I'd installed months ago. The interface was blank except for a single status indicator. Pending. 9:09. The parking garage echoed with the sound of a car door slamming somewhere above me. Normal office sounds. Normal office life continuing as if nothing had changed. As if the company's entire digital infrastructure wasn't about to shift beneath their feet like tectonic plates. The concrete pillar next to my car had a small crack running through it. I'd noticed it the day we'd moved into this building, joked with Jacob that it was a metaphor for how we'd break through barriers. Now it looked like a fault line ready to split wide open. 9:10. My phone vibrated once. The status indicator changed from pending to active. Then, a cascade of automated messages began flooding a hidden partition on my device. Firewall rules modified, port 443. Authentication timeout adjusted 30 seconds. Log rotation accelerated 2-minute intervals. Backup verification disabled. System monitoring delays implemented. Each message represented a tiny adjustment, individually meaningless, collectively devastating. Like loosening bolts on a bridge 1/4 turn at a time, the structure would hold until the exact moment it wouldn't. I finally got into my car but didn't start the engine. Instead, I drove up the garage ramps slowly, windows down, listening. By the time I reached street level, I could already hear it, the subtle shift in the building's rhythm. A few more people than usual were visible through the ground floor windows, walking with purpose that bordered on urgency. The rain had started while I was inside, that particular Seattle drizzle that couldn't decide if it wanted to be mist or actual precipitation. I pulled into a loading zone across the street, hazard lights blinking, and got out. The rain felt good on my face, washing away the sterile office air, the smell of Jacob's cologne, the suffocating weight of manufactured corporate dignity. I stood on the sidewalk, tilting my face up to the gray sky, and for the first time in months I felt free. No more pretending to be asleep when Jacob crept into bed at 3 a.m. No more forcing smiles in meetings while my work was stolen. No more swallowing my voice to maintain a peace that was already shattered. My phone buzzed again. Another status update. External probe detected, source Moscow. Right on schedule. The vulnerabilities I'd created were like blood in the water, and the sharks were already circling. But they weren't random hackers. They were professionals who monitored for exactly these kinds of openings. A cybersecurity company suddenly showing weakness was like a bank leaving its vault door ajar. Through the rain-streaked air, I could see more clearly now. The lobby, usually calm with its minimalist furniture and gentle water feature, was becoming animated. The security guard who'd been reading a newspaper was now on his phone, gesturing urgently. The receptionist was typing frantically, probably fielding calls from clients whose systems were showing anomalies. 9:14. A group of developers rushed past the windows, heading toward the elevator banks. I recognized 2 of them from my former team. They were practically running. My phone showed why. Database response time increased 400%, cascading delays initiated. The code wasn't destroying anything, not directly. It was simply making the system work against itself. Every security check now took 4 times as long, which made the next process wait, which created a bottleneck, which triggered more security checks. An elegant spiral of dysfunction. 3 people burst out of the building's main entrance, phones pressed to their ears. One was Gary from HR, his folder forgotten, looking like someone had just told him the building was on fire. In a way it was. No. I heard him saying into his phone. The entire client portal is down. They can't access anything. The client portal, the crown jewel of our service, where Fortune 500 companies monitored their security in real time. If that was down, phone lines would be lighting up like Christmas trees. 9:16. More people were visible through the windows now, moving between floors with increasing speed. Someone dropped a stack of papers near the window and nobody stopped to help pick them up. The careful corporate choreography was breaking down. My phone showed a new development. Beijing probe detected. London probe detected. Sao Paulo probe detected. The international hacker community had noticed. Nextcore, the company that promised to predict and prevent cyber attacks, was suddenly broadcasting its own vulnerability to anyone with the skills to look. It was like watching a shepherd realize his guard dogs had turned into sheep. A taxi pulled up beside me, the driver rolling down his window. "You okay, miss? You're getting soaked." "I'm perfect," I told him and meant it. He shook his head and drove off, probably thinking I was crazy. Maybe I was. Standing in the rain, watching my ex-husband's empire begin to crumble, feeling nothing but calm satisfaction. Sanity was relative. 9:18. The lobby was chaos now. I could see Jacob himself, having descended from his executive floor throne, standing near the reception desk and gesturing wildly. His perfect CEO composure was cracking. Melissa was beside him, her red power dress looking less powerful now, more like a target. Someone actually ran, across the lobby with a laptop under their arm. The elevators were constantly in motion, lights indicating every floor as teams scrambled to respond to a threat they couldn't understand. My phone provided running commentary. SSL certificate validation failing intermittently. Memory leak in authentication service expanding. Moscow probe successful, admin credentials harvested. That last one made me smile. Some Russian hacker was probably doing a victory dance right now, having breached the famous NextCore within minutes of detecting weakness. The credentials they'd stolen were real but limited. Enough to cause panic, not enough for serious damage. I wasn't cruel, just precise. 9:20. The rain had intensified, but I didn't move. Through the water streaming down my face, I watched two security guards rush out of the building and look around wildly, as if the threat might be standing right there on the sidewalk. Their eyes passed over me without recognition, just another pedestrian caught in the rain. Behind them, visible through the glass doors, someone had brought out a whiteboard into the lobby. They were trying to coordinate their response visually since the digital systems were becoming unreliable. It was almost quaint, like watching someone try to stop a flood with paper towels. Jacob was on his phone now, pacing back and forth. Even from across the street, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept running his hand through his hair. His tell when things were spiraling beyond his control. How many times had I seen that gesture during our startup days? Except back then I'd been the one who fixed whatever was broken. 9:22. A news van pulled up to the building faster than I'd expected. Someone inside must have tipped them off. A cybersecurity company under active attack was the kind of tech story that got immediate attention. The reporter was still adjusting her rain jacket as her cameraman set up his equipment. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Probably Melissa or Jacob trying to reach me on a different line. I deleted it without reading. Then another buzz. Tel Aviv probe detected. Mumbai probe successful. Toronto infiltration in progress. The whole world was watching NextCore burn, and they were all bringing marshmallows. Through the chaos, I spotted Sarah at her desk on the third floor, visible through the rain-washed windows. She wasn't running around like the others. She was sitting very still, staring at her screen. He knew. Maybe not the specifics, but she knew this wasn't random. Our eyes met across the distance and through the rain, and she pressed her hand against the window. A goodbye, or maybe an apology for the Tuesday lunches that stopped, for the friendship that withered under corporate pressure. I raised my hand in response, then turned and walked back to my car. 9:24. As I drove away, I could see the first police car arriving in my rearview mirror, followed by another news van. By tonight, NextCore would be trending on every tech platform. Cybersecurity giant falls to cyber attack. The headlines would write themselves. The rain drummed against my windshield as I merged into traffic, leaving the chaos behind. My phone continued buzzing with status updates, each one confirming that the code was working exactly as designed. Not destroying, just revealing. Not attacking, just opening doors that should have been locked. Everything Jacob had built on the foundation of my work was crumbling, and he couldn't even call me to fix it. The irony was beautiful enough to make me laugh. A sound that surprised me with its genuineness. For the first time in months, I was actually, truly laughing. The laughter died in my throat as my phone erupted with calls. Not the gentle buzz of notifications anymore. Actual calls, the old-fashioned kind that demanded immediate attention. The first name on the screen made my blood run cold. Richard Thompson. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, rain still hammering the roof of my car, and stared at his name flashing on the screen. 12 rings before it went to voicemail. Immediately it started again. This time I answered. Brenda. Thank God. Richard's voice was strained, nothing like the composed investor who'd questioned my stability months ago. What the hell is happening over there? Our monitoring systems show Nextcore's entire infrastructure is compromised. I wouldn't know, Richard. I was terminated this morning. Silence. Then, what? That's impossible. The Pacific Financial save was just 3 days ago. Ask Jacob. He felt my services were no longer required. But the attacks, they started minutes after. He stopped and I could practically hear the gears turning in his mind. Brenda, please. Whatever's happening, companies are pulling out. Our portfolio is hemorrhaging value. Can you fix this? I don't work there anymore. I'll pay you directly. Consultant fees. Whatever you want. Richard, I'm sitting in my car locked out of all systems with no access to the platform I built. Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't. He cursed, something I'd never heard from him before. This is going to destroy everything. Do you understand? Everything. I ended the call. Immediately another came through. Paul Harrison from Pacific Financial, the man whose company I'd saved 72 hours ago. Brenda, we're pulling our contract. I'm sorry, but we can't be associated with a compromised security firm. The board is in emergency session. This is a disaster. I understand, Paul. How could this happen? You were just... He paused. You knew this would happen, didn't you? When you called at 2 a.m. about our vulnerabilities. You were seeing the same weaknesses in your own system. I should go, Paul. If you start your own firm, call me. We'll be your first client. The calls kept coming. Investors, clients, former colleagues, journalists who'd somehow gotten my number. I sent them all to voicemail, watching the messages pile up like digital snow. Then at 10:47 a.m., Jacob's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Brenda, I need you to come back to the office immediately. No greeting, no pretense. His CEO voice had been replaced by something raw and desperate. I was escorted out by security, remember? Stop playing games. The composure cracked completely. The entire system is failing. We're losing everything. The code, your code, it's the only thing that can fix this. My code isn't the problem, Jacob. Then what is? These vulnerabilities appeared out of nowhere. The timing. The timing is unfortunate, I agreed. But if you'd kept the person who understood the system, maybe you'd be able to fix it. Brenda, please. His voice broke on the word. I know things ended badly this morning, but this is bigger than us. The company, our company, is dying. Your company. You made that very clear. I'll bring you back. Full restoration. We can work out the details later. With Melissa as my supervisor? Silence. Then, Melissa is handling operations. Is she handling them well? Are her protocols helping with the crisis? This isn't about her. No. The head of operations has nothing to do with operational failure. I heard muffled voices in the background, then Melissa's voice came on the line. Brenda, this is beneath you. Whatever vendetta you have against us, innocent people are being hurt. Our employees. The employees who watched me get marched out like a criminal? That was protocol. That was theater. I cut her off. You wanted everyone to see me humiliated. Well, now they can see you fail. Poetic, isn't it? Jacob grabbed the phone back. The Russians are inside our systems. The actual Russians, Brenda. They're downloading client data. Do you understand what this means? It means you should have invested more in security infrastructure instead of reorganizing to push out your co-founder. I'm begging you. Those 3 words hung in the air. Jacob had never begged for anything in his life. He'd charmed, persuaded, manipulated, demanded, but never begged. I can't help you, Jacob. I don't have access anymore. You made sure of that. I'll give you full admin access right now. Remote login. Whatever you need. And contaminate the crime scene. I'm sure the FBI would love that. The FBI? His voice pitched higher. They're not, we haven't. You haven't called them yet? A major cyber attack on a company handling security for Fortune 500 clients, and you haven't notified federal authorities? That's going to look interesting in the investigation. The sound he made wasn't quite a sob, but close. My phone beeped with another call. Local news station. I have to go, Jacob. Good luck with everything. Brenda, wait. I ended the call and switched to the news station. The reporter's words came rapid fire. Ms. Martinez? I'm calling about the situation at Nextcore. We understand you were the CTO until this morning. Can you comment on the timing of your departure and the current attack? No comment. But surely the coincidence. I said no comment. I turned my phone to silent and drove home through streets that felt different somehow. Lighter. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and gleaming. My house, soon to be just my house once the divorce went through, sat quiet and welcoming. Inside I made myself tea and opened my personal laptop, the one Jacob never knew about. The news was already everywhere. Breaking. NextCore Solutions suffers major cyber attack. Cybersecurity firm breached by international hackers. Clients flee as NextCore fails to protect itself. The tech blogs were having a field day. Someone had leaked internal communications showing the chaos. Screenshots of error messages, photos of the whiteboard in the lobby, even a video of Jacob shouting at someone in the parking garage. My phone, still on silent, showed 47 missed calls. The number kept climbing. I opened my encrypted partition and watched the real-time feeds. The vulnerabilities were being exploited from 17 different countries now. Each attacker thought they were the clever one who'd found a weakness, not realizing they were all walking through doors I'd strategically left open. The client exodus was swift and brutal. Pacific Financial's departure triggered a domino effect. If NextCore couldn't protect itself, how could it protect anyone else? By noon, 70% of their major contracts had termination clauses invoked. The investor situation was even worse. Richard Thompson didn't just pull funding. He issued a public statement distancing his firm from NextCore's fundamental security failures. Other investors followed suit, each statement another nail in the coffin. At 1 p.m. the FBI announcement came through. Federal authorities are investigating a significant breach at Seattle-based cybersecurity firm NextCore Solutions. Companies using NextCore services are advised to implement immediate alternative security measures. That was the kill shot. No company could survive the FBI essentially telling clients to abandon ship. I pulled up NextCore's stock tracker. They'd gone public just 6 months ago, another of Jacob's grand plans. The stock had opened at $47. It was now at $12 and falling. My phone lit up with a text from Sarah. He's crying in the server room. Actually crying. Melissa locked herself in her office. Everyone's updating their resumes. Another from a number I didn't recognize. This is Tom from security. I'm sorry about this morning. We all knew it was wrong. Jacob's getting what he deserves. At 2:30, the news broke that China's state media was running stories about American cybersecurity incompetence, using NextCore as Exhibit A. The international humiliation was complete. I closed my laptop and made another cup of tea. Outside, the sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting everything in that peculiar Seattle light that made the wet streets look like silver. My phone showed 132 missed calls now. I scrolled through them. Investors, clients, media, numbers I didn't recognize. And there, recurring like a desperate heartbeat, Jacob. Each unanswered call was a small victory, a tiny reversal of every time he'd dismissed me, talked over me, stolen credit for my work. He'd wanted to erase me from the company's story. Instead, my absence was the story. The local evening news led with NextCore. They'd found a photo of Jacob from a tech conference where he'd given a speech about impenetrable security just 2 weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The question everyone's asking, the anchor said, is how a cybersecurity company could be so vulnerable to the very threats it claimed to prevent. Former employees, speaking on condition of anonymity, report that the company's co-founder and technical architect was terminated just minutes before the attack began. They showed my LinkedIn photo, the professional one where I'm half smiling, looking confident and capable. Brenda Martinez could not be reached for comment. No, I couldn't. I was too busy watching an empire burn, one line of code at a time. The call from Global EC came 3 days after NextCore's implosion made headlines. I was sitting in my home office, still in my pajamas at noon, when their CEO personally reached out. Ms. Martinez? This is David from Global EC. I'll be direct. We need someone who actually understands predictive threat detection, and your work at Pacific Financial speaks for itself. Are you available for consulting? My first instinct was to say no. I needed time to process everything. But then I remembered the mortgage payment, the lawyer fees, the reality of starting over at 38. I'm listening. $5,000 a day, minimum 10-day contract, Possibility of extension. We need our systems audited yesterday. I nearly dropped my coffee. That was more than I'd made in a month at Nextcore. When do you need me? Can you start tomorrow? That's how my freelance career began. Not with careful planning but with desperate companies suddenly realizing their cybersecurity might have holes only I could see. Word spread quickly in Seattle's tech community. The woman who'd saved Pacific Financial was available, and everyone wanted to ensure they weren't the next Nextcore. My second client called while I was still working on global SEC's audit. Then a third. Within 2 weeks, I had more work than I could handle and was turning down contracts. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Jacob had tried to erase my professional existence, but instead he'd made me legendary. The mysterious CTO who'd left just before the catastrophe, the only one who could have prevented it. I set up a proper home office in what used to be Jacob's study. Removed his pretentious leather-bound books he'd never read, his awards for business excellence that now seemed like jokes. Replaced them with multiple monitors, a proper server setup, and a coffee machine that could sustain me through 18-hour days. The industry publications became my guilty pleasure. Every morning with my first cup of coffee, I'd read the latest updates on Nextcore's collapse. Nextcore loses 3 more major clients. Inside the chaos, former employees described toxic leadership. From 8 million to nothing. A cautionary tale. TechCrunch ran a particularly devastating piece featuring anonymous interviews with former employees. Someone, I suspected Sarah, had detailed how Jacob had systematically undermined his co-founder before the attack. The comment section was brutal. Classic case of ego over expertise, one commenter wrote. You don't fire your technical architect and expect to survive in cybersecurity. The Seattle Times business section featured a timeline of Nextcore's downfall, complete with a graph showing the stock price plummeting. They'd managed to get a photo of Jacob leaving the office, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 months. Gray stubble, wrinkled shirt, the hollow eyes of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. 6 weeks after the attack, Melissa's departure made the news. Not a grand announcement, just a small item in the tech gossip section. Head of Operations Melissa Rodriguez exits Nextcore amid ongoing crisis. Sarah texted me that night, you should have seen it. Jacob called her incompetent in front of everyone. Said her operational excellence had failed to prevent the breach. She threw her company laptop at him. Security had to separate them. I felt a twist of something, not sympathy exactly but recognition. Melissa had thought she was special, that she was different from me. Now she was learning what it felt like to be discarded when things got difficult. Her LinkedIn profile disappeared entirely 2 days later. When someone tried to hire her at a startup, a simple Google search brought up dozens of articles linking her to Nextcore's failure. He was radioactive. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a nervous process server who seemed relieved when I simply signed for them. Sandra, my attorney, reviewed them that afternoon. He's not fighting for anything, she said, seeming puzzled. The house is yours, the joint accounts get split 50-50, and he's waiving any claim to your future earnings. What about Nextcore shares? She laughed, but it wasn't happy. What shares? The company's worthless. Your 48% of nothing is still nothing. The financial statements she showed me were staggering. Nextcore, once valued at 8 million, was now worth less than 2 million and falling. The office lease alone was worth more than the company's assets. He's trying to sell, Sandra added. Word is he's shopping it around for pennies on the dollar, but no one's biting. Who wants a cybersecurity company known for being catastrophically hacked? Jacob tried calling me once during the divorce proceedings. I answered because Sandra advised me to document any contact. Brenda. His voice was flat, exhausted. I'm not calling about the company. Then why are you calling? I wanted to apologize. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. I know what I did was wrong. The way I treated you, the way I ended things. I got caught up in the growth, the success, the image of being this powerful CEO. Melissa made me feel like I could be someone more important than I was. And now I'm nobody. The board forced me to step down as CEO. I'm a figurehead with a worthless title and worthless shares in a worthless company. You're looking for sympathy? No. I'm looking for, I don't know, closure? Forgiveness. I can't give you either of those things, Jacob. I know. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What I threw away. What I destroyed. You were the soul of the company and I cut it out. Yes, I said simply. You did. The line went quiet except for his breathing. The code, he said finally. The vulnerabilities. They were too perfect, too targeted. Are you accusing me of something? No. I'm saying I understand. And if I were in your position I probably would have done the same thing. Or worse. I have to go, Jacob. Yeah. Take care, Brenda. That was the last time we spoke directly. The divorce was finalized a month later. I kept my maiden name on all the paperwork. Martinez, not his surname that I'd never legally taken anyway despite his assumptions. Meanwhile, NextCore continued its death spiral. Employees jumped ship daily. The Seattle office, once bustling with 60 people, was down to 15. They'd already shut down the Portland satellite office and were trying to sublease the Seattle space. The final nail came when the FBI investigation concluded. While they found no evidence of internal sabotage, my code was far too elegant for that. They did find evidence of financial irregularities. Those phantom companies Jacob and Melissa had been paying? The FBI was very interested in those. Richard Thompson called me one last time as NextCore entered its final days. We're writing it off as a complete loss, he said. $8 million gone. My partners want to know how I could have been so blind. You saw what Jacob wanted you to see. No, I saw what I wanted to see. A charismatic male CEO with a beautiful girlfriend and a convenient technical partner who did the real work. It's the oldest story in tech and I fell for it. What happens now? Bankruptcy. The assets will be sold off. The platform you built will probably be bought by someone who understands its value. Pennies on the dollar. And Jacob? Unemployable in tech. Between the failure and the FBI investigation, he's done. Last I heard he was moving back to Ohio to live with his parents. Ohio. Where he'd started, where he'd sworn he'd never return. The ambitious boy from Columbus who was going to conquer Seattle's tech scene was going home defeated. My consulting business meanwhile was thriving. I'd incorporated as SecureGuard Solutions, a name that felt both protective and powerful. In 2 months I'd made more than my annual salary at NextCore. Companies didn't just want my expertise. They wanted the woman who'd survived the industry's most spectacular betrayal. One evening, while reviewing a contract that would take me to San Francisco for a week, I got a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. The office is empty now. They're changing the locks tomorrow. I knew it was Sarah. I also knew what she was really telling me. An era was officially over. The company we'd built, the dream we'd shared, was dead. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on my deck, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in that maze of lights was an empty office with my code still embedded in its dead systems. Somewhere was Jacob probably packing his things. Somewhere was Melissa trying to figure out how to rebuild a career that had turned to ash. And here I was, alone but not lonely, broken but not destroyed. The consulting contracts on my desk represented a future I was building on my own terms. No co-founders, no partners, no one to betray me or steal credit for my work. The wine tasted like victory, bitter and sweet in equal measure. The glass of wine was still in my hand when I heard the knock. Not the doorbell. A knock, soft and hesitant, like someone afraid of being heard. It was past 10 on a Thursday night, 3 months after NextCore's spectacular collapse. I looked through the peephole and nearly dropped the glass. Jacob stood on my doorstep, but this wasn't the Jacob who'd fired me with a smile. His hair was too long, uncombed. He wore a wrinkled polo shirt I recognized from our dating days, the blue one with a small bleach stain near the hem. His hands shook slightly as he raised them to knock again. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Hello, Jacob." He looked up and I saw defeat written in every line of his face. Dark circles made his eyes look sunken. He'd lost weight, at least 15 pounds, and his wedding ring was gone, leaving a pale band of skin on his finger. "Can we talk?" His voice cracked on the second word. "We have lawyers for that. Not about the divorce. About NextCore. What's left of it?" I leaned against the doorframe, studying him. Why would I care about NextCore? Because I'm here to beg. The words fell out of him like stones. The company is dying, Brenda. I've got 2 weeks of operating capital left. Maybe 3 if I don't pay myself, which I haven't been anyway. That's not my problem. I know. God, I know. But I need you to hear me out. Please. 5 minutes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the satisfaction of seeing him broken. I stepped aside and let him in. He stood awkwardly in the living room looking at the space that used to be ours. I'd redecorated, removed every trace of our life together, painted the walls a warm terracotta instead of his preferred gray, replaced his modern furniture with comfortable pieces that actually felt like home. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the couch. He perched on the edge like he might need to run. I stayed standing. "The FBI cleared the company of criminal charges," he started. "But the financial investigation turned up the consulting fees. Melissa's schemes. I'm facing civil lawsuits from investors." "Melissa's schemes? You signed those checks?" His jaw tightened. "She convinced me it was standard practice. Hide some money for emergency operations," she said. I was stupid enough to believe her. "You were stealing from your own company." "I was being manipulated by someone I thought." He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "It doesn't matter now. She's gone, left the state entirely. Last I heard she was in Texas, working at her uncle's car dealership." A car dealership. The head of operations who'd helped destroy my life was now probably processing financing applications in Houston. "What do you want from me, Jacob?" He pulled out a folder from his bag, his hands trembling. "I want to offer you 48% ownership of NextCore. Full shareholder rights, board position, complete technical autonomy." I laughed, short and sharp. 48% of nothing is still nothing. "It won't be nothing if you come back. We both know the platform works. You built something extraordinary. The vulnerabilities that destroyed us, they weren't natural. They were surgical. Precise." Our eyes met. He knew. Of course he knew. "If you're accusing me of something..." "I'm not. I'm saying that someone who could create those vulnerabilities could also fix them. Permanently. Make the platform stronger than ever." "Why only 48%? Why not 50? "Because I need to maintain technical control for the investors. But you'd have veto power on any major decision. You'd essentially be equal partner, just like..." He swallowed. "Just like we always should have been." I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, making him wait. The satisfaction of this moment. Him begging, offering me everything I'd wanted, should have felt better. Instead I felt hollow. "Melissa is gone?" I asked without turning. "Completely. I'll put it in writing. She's banned from any involvement with the company forever. And my technical decisions? Absolute authority. I won't even have access to the core systems if you don't want me to. The employees who remain, do they know you're here?" "The 12 people left. They're the ones who told me to come." Sarah specifically said. He paused. "She said I'd thrown away the best thing that ever happened to the company out of ego and stupidity." Sarah. "Still fighting for me even when I wasn't there. I need complete access to all financial records. Real ones, not the sanitized versions you showed me before." "Done. And I want it in writing that you acknowledge my role as the primary architect of all core technology." "Yes. And Jacob." I turned to face him. "If you ever try to undermine me again, I walk. And this time I take the platform with me. Legally." His face went pale. "How could you?" "The same way I could create vulnerabilities that looked like random hacker entry points. Don't underestimate me again." He nodded slowly. "I never should have underestimated you in the first place." We spent the next 2 hours going through his proposal. He'd clearly had lawyers prepare it. Everything I asked for was already included, plus provisions I hadn't thought of. Full medical benefits retroactive to my termination. Compensation for the months I'd been gone. Even a clause stating that any future sale of the company required my explicit approval. "When do you need an answer?" I asked when we'd reviewed everything. "Honestly, yesterday. But I know I have no right to push. Take the time you need." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Brenda, I know this doesn't fix what I did. The betrayal, the affair, the way I tried to erase you from something you built. I don't expect forgiveness." "Good. Because you won't get it." "I know. But maybe we can build something new. Not as husband and wife, obviously, but as business partners who learned an expensive lesson." After he left, I called Sandra. "He offered you what?" She sounded stunned after I explained. "Brenda, this is unprecedented. You'd have almost equal control." "Is it legally solid?" "I'll review it tomorrow, but from what you're describing, yes. The question is whether you want to go back to that environment. Did I? My consulting business was thriving. I was my own boss, choosing my clients, setting my hours. Why would I return to the place of my humiliation? But then I thought about the platform. My code, my innovation sitting dormant in a dying company. The potential wasted. The problems it could solve if properly managed. I texted Sarah. Jacob came to see me. Her response was immediate. Please come back. We need you. The platform needs you. I'll personally ensure no one disrespects you ever again. Monday morning I walked through Nextcore's doors for the first time in 3 months. The office was ghostly, empty desks, dark offices, the reception area unmanned. The 12 remaining employees were clustered in what used to be the break room, now converted to a makeshift operations center. They all stood when I entered. Sarah stepped forward. Welcome back. We've prepared a presentation on current system status whenever you're ready. Where's Jacob? In the small conference room. He said he'd stay out of your way unless you need him. Smart. He was giving me space to establish authority. I spent the morning reviewing the damage. It was worse than I'd imagined. The platform was holding together with digital duct tape and prayers. But underneath the patches and workarounds, my architecture remained solid. Give me 72 hours, I told the team. We'll not only be operational, we'll be stronger than before. The work was exhausting but familiar. Every line of code welcomed me back like an old friend. The vulnerabilities I'd created were still there, dormant but dangerous. I closed them one by one, then built new defenses that turned former weaknesses into strengths. By Wednesday afternoon the platform was humming. Not just functional, elegant. The months of distance had given me perspective on improvements I hadn't seen before. Jacob appeared in the doorway of the server room where I was working. The monitoring systems, he said quietly. They're all green. First time since January. They'll stay that way. Thank you. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since I'd returned. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for what this platform could be. For the problems it can solve. For the people whose data it can protect. I know. Good. Now let me work. He left and I turned back to my screens. The code flowed like it had in the early days back when we were building dreams on coffee-stained napkins. Except now I was building something better. Something truly mine. The platform pulsed with renewed life and for the first time in months I felt complete. The platform's renewed strength drew attention faster than either of us expected. Within a week of my fixes going live, Pacific Financial called. Not Jacob, me directly. Brenda, Paul Harrison here. We heard you're back at Nextcore. Is it true the vulnerabilities are completely resolved? Every single one. Plus additional safeguards that didn't exist before. We want to return as clients. But only if you personally guarantee the security architecture. I glanced across the office at Jacob, who was pretending not to listen from his desk. Send the contract to my attention. I'll review it personally. The first board meeting with my new authority was scheduled for the following Monday. I arrived early, choosing my seat carefully, not at the head where Jacob traditionally sat, but at the position directly opposite him. Equal and opposing. The message was clear. Richard Thompson arrived first, his surprise evident when he saw me. Brenda. I heard you were back, but I wasn't sure I believed it. 48% ownership makes it worthwhile, I said simply. His eyebrows rose. 48? That's one board vote away from control, Jacob said, entering the room. He looked better than he had at my door, clean-shaven, pressed shirt, but the confidence was gone. Brenda has full technical authority and veto power on major decisions. Other board members filtered in, each showing the same surprise at the new dynamic. When Jacob called the meeting to order, I interrupted. Before we begin, I need to clarify the new structure. All technical decisions, hiring for technical positions and platform development go through me. Jacob handles business operations, but any decision affecting the core product requires my approval. That seems, one member started. Non-negotiable, I finished. Those are the terms that brought me back. If anyone has issues with that arrangement, I'm happy to walk away and take my 48% worth of votes with me. Silence. They all knew what that meant. Without me they had nothing. Well then, Richard said slowly, let's hear about the recovery plan. I laid out my vision. Not just recovery, transformation. The attack had taught us valuable lessons about our own vulnerabilities. We could use that knowledge to build something unprecedented. A security platform that had survived the worst and emerged stronger. It's brilliant, Richard admitted. But we need clients to believe in us again. They will, I said. Because we're going to be transparent about what happened. Not the details but the lesson. We're the security company that learned from failure. That's more valuable than false promises of invulnerability. Jacob started to speak. I think what Brenda means. I said exactly what I mean. I cut him off. And I don't need translation. His face flushed, but he nodded. Of course. My apologies. The room shifted. They'd never seen anyone shut down Jacob so definitively. The power dynamic was clear now. I wasn't his technical support anymore. I was his equal, perhaps more. Over the next weeks, Jacob tested boundaries constantly. He scheduled a meeting with a potential CTO candidate without telling me. I walked into his office during the interview. Thank you for coming, I told the candidate. But the position isn't available. We won't be hiring a CTO while I'm here. The candidate looked confused, glancing between Jacob and me. There's been a miscommunication, Jacob said smoothly. No, I replied. There's been a decision. Mine. After the candidate left, Jacob's composure cracked. You embarrassed me. You went behind my back. How does it feel? He wanted to implement cost cuts, starting with the development team's equipment budget. I called an all-hands meeting and overruled him publicly. Investment in our technical infrastructure is non-negotiable, I announced. In fact, we're doubling the equipment budget. Quality tools create quality products. We can't afford, Jacob started. We can't afford not to. Check the books again. The Pacific Financial contract alone covers it. Sarah suppressed a smile. The other developers looked relieved. They'd been working with outdated equipment while Jacob spent money on his executive office renovation. By month 3, we'd recovered 4 major clients. Each contract came with a personal security review by me, my signature on every assessment. My name became the company's seal of quality. Tech blogs started calling it the Brenda effect. The extraordinary comeback led by the woman who'd been pushed out. New clients came calling. They wanted the platform that had been battle-tested, broken, and rebuilt stronger. Our vulnerability had become our strength. Our failure transformed into credibility. We need to discuss expansion, Jacob said during a planning session. Open a New York office. We need to solidify what we have first, I countered. Expansion was what distracted you last time. Distracted me from what? From remembering that without strong technical foundation, everything else is just expensive decoration. The room went quiet. Everyone knew what I meant. His affair with Melissa, his obsession with appearing successful rather than being successful. It was month 4 when Jacob finally confronted me directly. We were alone in the office late one evening reviewing quarterly reports. The numbers were exceptional. We'd already surpassed our previous peak valuation. You did it, he said suddenly. Did what? The vulnerabilities. The attack. You orchestrated all of it. I set down my pen and looked at him directly. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's acknowledgement. The timing, the precision, the way the vulnerabilities disappeared the moment you returned. No one else could have done it. If you believe that, why haven't you gone to the authorities? He laughed bitterly. With what proof? You're too smart to leave evidence. Besides, we both know I deserved it. You destroyed my life, I said quietly. Tried to steal my work, humiliated me, betrayed our marriage and our partnership for someone who abandoned you the moment things got difficult. I know. Do you really understand what it felt like to watch you and Melissa plan my professional execution while I slept next to you every night? To see my life's work credited to others? To be escorted out like a criminal from the company I built? His hands clenched on the desk. I was an idiot. Arrogant, selfish, and stupid. I threw away the best thing in my life for an ego boost and a pretty face who told me what I wanted to hear. Yes, I agreed. You did. We sat in silence for a moment. The platform is worth $12 million now, he said finally. $4 million more than our peak. Your 48% is worth more than the entire company was before. Money was never the point, Jacob. Then what was? Respect. Recognition. The acknowledgement that I was never your supporting player. I was the main architect of everything we built. You are. He met my eyes. And everyone knows it now. 6 months after my return, we held a company celebration. Not in some expensive restaurant, but in the office with the 35 employees we'd grown back to. I stood at the front, not beside Jacob but alone as the technical founder who'd saved the company. Nextcore fell because we forgot what made us strong, I said, looking directly at Jacob. We forgot that technology isn't about appearance or position or politics. It's about building something that works, something that protects, something that matters. The applause was genuine. Sarah started it, but everyone joined in, even Jacob. Later, as we cleaned up, Jacob approached me one last time. For what it's worth, he said, you're the most brilliant person I've ever known. I just wish I'd remembered that before I lost everything that mattered. You didn't lose everything, I reminded him. You still have 52% of a $12 million company. That's not what I meant. I knew what he meant. But that door had closed the moment he'd chosen Melissa over me, position over partnership, ego over love. Good night, Jacob, I said, gathering my things. As I left the office, my office now as much as his, I thought about the timer that had started this all. 10 minutes that changed everything. The code that had brought a giant to its knees and lifted me from the ashes of betrayal. Walking to my car under Seattle's ever-present clouds, I felt the weight of my keys. Heavier now with the additional office keys, server room access, the physical proof of my position. My phone buzzed with a text from a reporter wanting to interview me about the greatest comeback story in tech. I deleted it. The real story was too complex for headlines, too raw for public consumption. It was about more than business or betrayal or revenge. It was about discovering that sometimes the person others underestimate most is exactly who holds all the power. The platform hummed along, secure and strong, protecting data across the globe. My code, my creation, finally acknowledged as mine. And Jacob? He'd learned the hardest lesson of his life. Never underestimate the woman who built your kingdom, because she knows exactly how to bring it down. And more importantly, she's the only one who can build it back up. If this story of brilliant revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Brenda watched her code activate in real time, bringing down the empire Jacob built on her stolen work. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.